Welcome to the Arts and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall, starring A.M. Hall. Now, here is A.M. Hall.
Welcome to Art and Oddities with A.M. Hall, where I talk about anything that strikes my fancy, to include all kinds of creative works, from children's cartoons to underground zines, to identity politics and everything in between. My guests and I will discuss how art impacts and reflects culture and counterculture, enables individualism and conformity, and have loads of fun along the way. I am your host, A.M. Hall, aka Anthony Bonafini, aka Galena Storm, aka Aquaces Mancuso. This episode, I tell you all about my adventures with upcycling to make the costumes for the Trial of Hephaestus. Then I interview James A. Roberson of JARHUMOR, and he gives some very good advice for getting your work out there and making a living from it. As an aside, if you enjoy listening to the podcast, please support my Patreon at patreon.com/panicbedlam. That's PANIKBEDLAM. Panic and I are looking to get some better quality microphones and make the entire podcast just sound all around better, but we can't do it without your help. So, I'm still working non-stop on the film, The Trial of Hephaestus. I don't know for sure if I've mentioned that I have a role. I play the narrator character of the satyr. That's actually what technically makes the film a satire, the fact that there is a satyr in the show, even though it's not technically satirical. It's a comedy, but it's not really a satire. And since I made nearly every costume in the film, I also made the costume for the satyr. The costume consisted of a black tank, fuzzy brown shorts, and a faux fur shrug and leg warmers. I've never worked with fur of any kind before, and it took me a while to get the hang of it. Fortunately, the pieces were incredibly easy. The shrug I was wearing was literally a rectangle. If you're someone who sews or would like to learn to sew, it's an incredibly easy project and great for beginners. You don't even need a pattern. Just Google rectangle shrug and you'll find plenty of tutorials on how to make it. And the leg warmers were nearly rectangles. They were a little wider at the bottom, so I suppose they were technically trapezoids, but I sort of made it up as I went along. The hardest part was making them tight enough so that they would stay on, but loose enough that they didn't cut off my circulation. That actually required some trial and error on my part, and I'm not sure I nailed it, but it worked well enough. The shorts were relatively easy, even though I don't have a whole lot of experience making shorts or pants. I made them from a modified pajama pants pattern, which, I don't know, pajama pants are weird. I made them and put them on, and the waist came up to my armpits. But instead of just bringing them down by a set amount all the way around, which that has given me fit problems in the past, I got around the fit issues by putting them on and tracing around the waist with chalk where I felt that they should lie. And when I took them off and looked at the line I'd drawn, I saw that the back was much higher than the front, which it shouldn't have surprised me, as I'm fairly well endowed in the behind area, and that means that it takes more fabric to cover the back than the front. So even though the shorts look fine when they're on my body, they look a little strange and misshapen when they're lying flat. And I think that concept right there might be part of why clothing in stores tend to fit so badly. They aren't really meant to look good on people. They're meant to look good on hangers, so they're sold to consumers at a glance. But once we get them on our varying shaped bodies, they don't look as good as anymore. That was kind of a weird segue into my issues with the garment industry. That's actually the reason I learned to sew in the first place, because of my issues with ready-to-wear clothing. They aren't meant to fit humans, not even humans who are models or shaped like models. They're made to look good when they're packaged and sold to us. And they're made in such a way that there's as little fabric waste as possible, which, while that sounds green on paper, the end result is something that doesn't really flatter the wearer. Even though I support the idea of upcycling and green lifestyles, I only ever really sew with new fabric. It's rare that I will make something out of a garment that I purchased secondhand, for two reasons. One is that I rarely find something with enough fabric to make it easily modifiable, and that actually ties into my second reason. I don't want to buy a plus-size garment just to cut it down to fit me, because of another of my issues with the garment industry, the fact that they tend to neglect plus-size customers. So when people who are bigger tend to buy clothes, they tend to wear them until they fall apart and cannot be donated, which means it's hard to find plus-size clothes in the second-hand market. And so I like to leave them for those who actually need them. Working on the costumes for this film really forced me to be far more creative and work with what I already have versus what I wish I had. Most of the costumes had an upcycled element to them, especially Hermes's toga, which, as I stated in just the last episode, was made from a gazillion pairs of old jeans. Those jeans were in part of a grab bag of clothes that had been gifted to Evie and I specifically for our art projects. And lots of them went into the film in unexpected ways. For example, the skirt that Cupid wears is made from new muslin, but is edged with a navy blue fabric that was salvaged from a t-shirt found in the bag. Hermes's tunic is made from new white undershirts, but the neckline and armbands were also made from salvaged materials from the bag. Side panels, too. Upcycling is something that I'm not very good at all, and it's something that I really admire. I had sort of a trial by fire in the process of making the costumes for the film, and it taught me an important lesson. If you're a beginner, it's important to start with things that are easy. My skills are certainly up to par, and I could have done more elaborate costumes than what we ended up with. That was certainly my original plan. But sometimes easy is what gets it done, and most of the time, very few people know what was easy or what was hard. So the moral of today's story is don't make things harder for yourself than they need to be. Keep things simple, silly. If you're a beginner, make things that are easy, and if you're not a beginner, keep making things that are easy. Of course, I'm not saying not to challenge yourself, but just don't poo-poo the easy things to do just because you can handle something more elaborate. Sometimes the easy way is the better way, which was certainly the case for the film. Please stay tuned for the interview. Today, I am joined by James A. Robertson of JARHUMOR. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's morning in America, and you got me up in the morning, which is not my normal thing to do.
Yeah, it's like 10 o'clock at night for you, isn't it? Even though we're recording at like 9:30.
Yeah, the dangers of being an artist that you're working from home is that you set your own schedule. So I've lately been sleeping from about noon to 8 p.m. Yeah, so this is a little odd for me, and I think that's fitting because this is the Art and Oddities podcast.
Well, that's not the reason I named it was for odd art. I named it for odd people making art.
I think what I just said applies.
Okay.
What are you doing here?
Well, can you...
I'm sorry, I'm throwing you off. Like you have a whole spiel ready, and here I am.
I do have
Go
questions
ahead.
all listed out, but if you want to just have a conversation and call it a podcast and just talk about your art, tell me a little bit about like JARHUMOR. Why is it called JARHUMOR? Is it because you keep your ideas on scraps of paper in a jar?
No, that's terrible. That is the hackiest thing. God. All right. I get asked this question a lot. A lot of people don't make the connection. One person did once, and that was it. My initials are JAR, James A. Robertson. So that's where the JAR comes from. And humor was a word that I chose a few years ago because I always wanted to focus on the humor. I didn't know what I was going to do. If I was going to make movies, if I was going to do stand-up comedy, if I was going to do writing or cartooning yet. But the word humor kind of stuck, and I like that. So JARHUMOR, all one word, all capital letters.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you give me a brief overview of what it is that you're doing right now?
It was an interesting journey for me. As you know, because you've known me for a few years, that when you met me, I believe when I was doing stand-up comedy, actually.
Okay.
And I was also I was at the end of making movies with my friends. I was at if I remember correctly, does that sound right?
Yeah, the time that I actually appeared in at least one, but I don't think that we ended up doing anything with it.
I did.
Oh, okay.
The Master of a Thousand Monsters. Even back then, I was obsessed with B movies and monster movies and everything like that, and just trying to figure out a way to express that. And I enjoyed cartooning, but I never thought I had the skill, or back then I used the word talent, to actually pursue cartooning. Now I know better. It's a skill. It's not a talent. You're not born with it. You got to practice. You got to sit down. Got to make the lines do what you want to do with your brain and your hand, and you got to practice.
And that is true for everyone. Hear that, listeners?
So now I am a cartoonist, sort of a reluctant cartoonist, but I'm starting to become comfortable with it. Because it wasn't my first choice. My first choice was making movies and writing humor. But I've discovered cartooning is a fantastic way of creating characters. I don't have to wrangle actors. I don't have to set up lights. I don't have to find locations. I can draw everything. Yeah. And for someone on a micro budget, cartooning is fantastic. So I can do everything that I wanted to do with film in a controlled thing with cartooning, which I enjoy.
I noticed that a lot of your cartoons basically feature you as a character standing behind a camera making a film.
Yes, so that's what I did. I took my filmmaking dream and I turned it into a sort of a character within the comic strip. The comics that I do are about people making bad movies, making low-budget monster, alien, sci-fi movies. And the comics switch between being about the movies. So sometimes a comic will just be a scene from the movie, and then it will switch to the making of that movie. And you'll see me behind the camera.
Yeah.
Now.
I noticed that you have a handful of stock characters that you kind of pull out for your comic strips. Is this, can you tell me a little bit about them? Like how many you have? Do they have names and backstories?
Well, I can tell you the reason that you chose the word stock is because it does seem as if I'm using the same images over and over again because I'm an incredibly lazy cartoonist. I draw a thing. This is how I make a comic. I draw a thing, and then I put it in the computer, and then I'll use it a bunch of times. And I'll just copy and paste it over and over again. Sometimes I'll change the expression, I'll change the arm. Now I just do things like change the arm and change the eyes and the mouth. I used to not even do that. That's how lazy I was. I'm getting better. Like I said, I'm becoming more comfortable as a cartoonist. And there are several characters, and I'm starting to experiment with telling the audience a little bit more about each character. Because what I do are comic strips. It's not a graphic novel. It's not even a comic book. It's 3 panels that's basically set up punchline.
It's very much set up like a web comic, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more or less what it is, and then it eventually gets published into a book. Since I'm not published in a newspaper, yeah, you could just call it a web comic because it is on the internet. I don't necessarily use that term, but it doesn't matter. I just see them as comic strips.
Because you and I grew up in an age where people read comics on the newspaper.
Yes, they did, and I enjoy that more than I do really comic books because I like the quickness of it, and it is the setup punchline. Now, your question was how many characters do I have? Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I do know the main characters right now are myself. I have sort of a girlfriend character named Karen, which is also the name of my cat.
You named your fake girlfriend after your cat. I like that.
Or vice versa. Maybe I named my cat after my fake girlfriend. Yeah, but I'm just now starting to use names. There was one comic recently where I actually kind of had a damn it Karen moment, but prior to that, you never heard the person's name. You never even heard my name until recently in the comic. Because there just wasn't time. Because it's such a short format, which I actually enjoy because the reader doesn't need a whole lot of time to invest. They just bam. They have to read 3 panels. And they laugh or they don't. but hopefully they laugh, and if they do, maybe they read another one. And I think that's better than sitting through like a 90-minute movie that could potentially be horrible, and them not feeling it. Because there's always an audience for whatever you're doing out there. And it's getting people to actually invest the time in it, which is why I like what I'm doing right now. The comics are very short. I'm even doing YouTube videos that are fairly short. And you can hook people in. No, it's easier. It's easier to get people interested when you're doing something that's that quick.
But you used to make movies that were feature length, I think.
Well, I don't think I could ever get anyone together or me personally have the attention span to do a feature length. So the films I were making were short. I called them short films of horror, but they weren't horror films. And that was the hardest thing for me to explain to people. They're like, "Oh, you make horror movies." I'm like, "No, they're comedies. They're spoofs." But I was too dumb to realize that I should call it something goofy, like Attack of the Thing from the Place.
Attack of the Thing from the Place. That's actually a decent title for a weird, goofy movie.
Exactly. And see, now my stuff actually has titles like that. When I decided to do my first YouTube video, and my YouTube videos are an extension of the comic strip where I am playing my character, reading screenplays that I've supposedly written. The first one I did was called The Thing That Wouldn't Flush. And then I'm trying to remember some of the...
There was the one with the social media guru and her cell phone.
Oh, #lizard people.
Oh, yeah. Like the Alex Jones lizard people, or...
Yes, what David Icke. Like, I'm a big fan of that type of stuff. Like, I love conspiracy theory stuff.
Okay.
And I said I want to do something like that. And there's a lot of cryptic sort of conspiracy stuff in that one, which is kind of neat. A Chainsaw Zombie Sleepover is another one that I do. That was one of the ones I was trying to think of. And Laser Sword Jones versus the Jive-Ass Space Monster. So as you can see, I've gotten much better at letting people know I'm doing parody and satire.
You were the person who introduced me to Ed Wood, and you taught me that a bad movie can be good. But I think the biggest difference between what you did and what Ed Wood did was that he was being 100% sincere, whereas you were trying to be goofy. The thing that comes to my mind immediately when I think of that is there was a handcuff sequence where someone was handcuffed to a chair, and he managed to escape by just lifting up the chair leg and pulling away.
Yeah, the character of Killer Man, which it's interesting. I go back to the well quite often from my old material, and Killer Man actually made it into my comic strips.
Did he?
And he's now known as Killer Man, the man who kills teenagers.
Okay.
And yes, and you mentioning Ed Wood, Tim Burton's Ed Wood, the biopic he did, changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I saw that and I said, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to make...
Oh, wow.
I want to make laughably horrible movies like that. But what like you said, the tragedy of Ed Wood, because I've actually read the book that it was based off of, which is not as upbeat as Tim Burton's film. Ed Wood was an alcoholic. He died penniless, living on a friend's couch. His life was horrible, and it's nothing to admire or look up to. That's why I'm very concerned about. Like, I sell t-shirts, I sell books, I'm trying to make that YouTube money right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to end up like that, living on someone's couch. So yeah, there's a harsh reality there. And that's why I as much as I admire that, it is a cautionary tale as well.
So I like that you mentioned that you sell t-shirts. Can you tell me a little bit about what sells and what doesn't?
One of the things that I noticed was I started getting success in selling t-shirts when I picked kind of a genre. I chose to go for the sci-fi horror type stuff, but parody, just like the comics and the YouTube videos. And once I did that, I found an audience. My two big sellers right now is one that says it has a picture of a scientist who's been transformed into a giant fly, sort of like Vincent Price's The Fly.
Or like Baxter Stockman from the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, there's a sort of a resemblance there as well. And it says, "Don't bug me while I'm doing science." That's a big hit right now, and I think it's sort of like a message that people enjoy, not just because of the pun, but it's personal. Don't bug me while I'm doing science. They wear that as a t-shirt. The other one is of two robots talking, and the one robot is speaking in binary code, the 01101 type thing, and the other one just says, "I know, right?"
That's pretty funny.
And the other day, I'm searching around for my stuff on the internet, and I come across a picture of Bruce Vilanch. Do you know who Bruce Vilanch is?
No.
Legendary comedy writer Bruce Vilanch. This guy wrote for the Oscars a few years ago. He's on those like sort of reality talking head shows where he's interviewed all the time. Kind of a cool, weird dude wearing that t-shirt, wearing my t-shirt to an event.
Oh, wow.
I lost it. I'm like, this is incredible. He was some opening of something, and he's big on wearing t-shirts. He likes scouring the internet for weird, funny t-shirts. And there's a picture of him proudly with his hands on his hips, smiling, wearing that t-shirt, wearing that robot t-shirt of mine. And it's one of the proudest moments, next to Will Wheaton sharing some of my work on his Tumblr.
Oh, wow.
Those are my two claims to fame right there.
I think my biggest claim to fame is having you on my podcast so
Hey,
far.
there you go. But yeah, the t-shirts are right now how I'm making money.
Mm-hmm.
The book I've only sold a few copies of because I've recently put all my comics and fake screenplay stuff and t-shirt art into a book called Awful Movies from Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Available now on Amazon.
I do have an ulterior motive for asking. Evie has put together some t-shirts and mugs for the podcast, and I'm sure my listeners who also make art are looking to make some money off of their art. So I just want to know if you have any tips for me and for my listeners to make some money off of these kinds of products.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what you buy. Sort of become your customer. You get the idea in your head of who your customer is, and it should be someone like you. What you enjoy.
You mean someone broke?
Yeah, no, someone that has the same, like, what would you wear?
Okay.
What sort of message? So for your podcast, for example, you'd want to think of some type of saying that a person would proudly wear on their chest that proclaimed, I'm a weird artist, I'm, some type of...
Should be my closing statement, probably. I close every podcast with the same statement. The highest form of magic is doing, and expressing yourself is art. Because I really do believe that. I really believe that the highest form of magic is doing in order to make something real, make something happen. That's what magic is, making something happen. So in order to make something happen, you have to make it happen. You have to do it. You have to produce this thing. And that's magic, is art.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That would make an excellent t-shirt. Some t-shirt artist told me once, he said, a good t-shirt is something that can be read very quickly. Now, that statement's a little long, but the first part of it can be self-contained. It could be like a much bigger text. What was the first part of it, the doing?
The highest form of magic is doing.
Right there, boom. That could be your big text, and then you could put the rest of it kind of in smaller text, or not even use it, and then have your little Art and Oddities logo down at the bottom and stuff, and have cool, funky stuff coming out the sides of it. I think that'd be great. I think I've seen Evie's art. I enjoy it, and I think that would be great, like coming out weird funkiness around that type of sort of a nice typography right in the middle. That would make an excellent t-shirt.
All right. Well, thank you for that idea. I might just actually put that one out. I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to plug your stuff. Is there anything that you're currently working on right now that you want to share?
Yeah, well, I mean, I got the website, jarhumor.com, and it's got links to everything else that I'm doing. YouTube's a big thing I'm trying to get going right now. The latest thing that I've started. I've been tinkering with it for the past 2 years, but I'm getting serious about it the last couple of months.
Okay.
My YouTube is also Jar Humor. I'm on the internet everywhere as Jar Humor, all one word. Humor spelled the American way. It's JARHUMOR. I got the book, Awful Movies from Earth, available on Amazon, like I said, plus there's links all over my stuff in that.
Now, my podcast listeners know I've been making a film. It's all I talk about. And you've seen a few clips of it because we've been posting it secretly for some people that we like. Can you tell my listeners what your opinion of this film is?
I think it's great what you guys are doing. You've got a group of people that obviously care about this story. You're putting a lot of work into it. You yourself, you're putting a lot of the costume design and everything into it. I don't understand a word of it though.
It's okay if you don't.
It's cryptic and it's symbolic.
And it's written in fairly archaic language, even though it's a new play. It was written to be intentionally hard to understand.
Yeah, and there's a group of people, though, that's what they enjoy. It gives them something to chew on. They don't want everything explained to them. They want to sit and they want to dig into it. And you get those hardcore fans, that's going to be fantastic. My stuff is very sophomoric. I don't know if that's the right word.
It's easy.
It's easy. It's funny, but you don't really have to think about it. But I will say there is a deeper thing going on because if you pay attention, everything's connected. It all exists within the exact same world. I switch topics from your thing to my
It's
thing.
quite all right. It's like, I spend every podcast talking about what I'm doing, and lately the only thing I've been doing is this film, so...
Yeah, well, I think it's fantastic. I think when you do the thing, now a lot of people, they don't even bother to even try to do the thing, and that's tragic.
Yeah.
And I've been, you know how long I've been trying to do the thing. It's relentless with me.
How long have we known each other? It's been like 20 years, hasn't it?
No, because then we would have, I'm 35, I would have known you when I was 15. No, we knew each other when I think I was like 25 or
Yeah, it was
something.
about that age, yeah, I suppose. So it's only been about 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. But so for 10 years, you've seen me relentlessly pursuing my dreams. It's my dharma. It's everything that I pour into basically my life has been this work. And that sounds a little dramatic, especially for making stupid comics. But
You know what? The world needs more people like that. The world needs more people who are hell-bent on just getting their voices heard, from the moment they exit the womb. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. It took me a long time to figure out that I want my voice heard. But even now, at age of 33, I'm trying to figure out how to get my voice heard, and I've figured out a medium for it. I figured out that there's a podcast for this. And now that I've figured out a way to get my voice heard, I had to figure out what I wanted to say. What do I want to say? Well, I want to say to everyone, make your voice heard.
yeah, and that's excellent. I don't know much about my voice being heard. I just want to tell jokes. But I'm very passionate about it, and it's that same type of passion that you're talking about. And I've changed mediums dozens of times, which some people might look at as good or bad, but I've been narrowing it down to what I can do. I mean, I'm self-contained now. I have 3 things that I do very well right now. I make t-shirts, I create comics, and then I do these screenplay videos where I pretend to be my character from the comic, pitching my screenplays to people via a video. I mean, these 3 things I do by myself. Like, no one else is helping me. And I don't have to rely on anyone.
On the other hand, you don't have any support.
That's true. But people on the internet, I do have fans that are very supportive. So I can't say I have no support, but I don't have anyone here taking some of the workload. It is all me doing it, which can be taxing.
And Evie and I are just 2 people. We're trying to make this our career, but again, no support. It's tough.
Oh yeah, I'm barely getting by with the t-shirt money, and I constantly have to have had jobs.
Well, your job and your means of employment aren't necessarily the same thing, so...
Yeah.
I also have a day job, and I've made a podcast about that. That was a very long wrap-up, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling. I don't even know if this is good or not, what I'm saying.
I will probably edit a little bit of the rambles out. However, we should probably figure out a conclusion.
Okay, so maybe start in with one of those, well, thank you for blah, 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 and I say... I swear it. I swear to you, this should be the ending right here, us discussing how to end this thing.
This has been my problem my entire life, is I don't know how to conclude things. And I think that's why I've never finished anything in my life before, is because I don't know how to write a conclusion for a term paper, and I don't know how to conclude an interview, and I don't know how to finish, the work that I put out there.
I will be incredibly disappointed, and I'm putting pressure on you, if this right here is not in the finished product of the podcast. This should be the ending. The ending should be you sitting here going, we don't have an ending, and me going, well, let's fake it. Let's fake an ending. This is how the podcast ends. Just at any point right now, just slam the door and stop the podcast on your listener.
And I will hit the stop recording button, and I will just end the podcast for everyone.
Yes, because that's art. That's how it happens. This is not scripted. You just go out there and the thing happens the way it happens. Did you push the button yet? Because I'm becoming very uncomfortable. And this also, me saying that I'm uncomfortable, better be in the podcast.
I will hit the button.
Push the button.
Alright, please stay tuned for the credits. Thanks for listening to the Art and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall. That's our show for today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go through the grueling task of leaving us a review on whatever platform you're using to listen. I have a new and improved URL to the iTunes page. It's tiny.cc/amhall. Or just Google Art and Oddities Podcast for the player of your choice. I believe most people listen to us on YouTube. The production of this podcast has been provided by Reverend Panic Evelyn Bedlam, or Evie for short, and without her it would not exist. As stated in the show's intro, we are hoping to upgrade our microphones and other sound equipment. You can help us do that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/panicbedlam. That's PANIKBEDLAM. Evie has also done me the honor of designing some t-shirts for the podcast. Just search for Panic Bedlam on redbubble.com. Links to the Redbubble page and to pages where you can purchase Evie's books and tarot cards will be available in the show notes. Today's guest, James A. Robertson, can be found all over the internet. Just search for JARHUMOR as he stated in the interview. I'll also include links to his webpage and YouTube page in the show notes. Our theme music, Doxal Dance in Space-Time, or Belial and His Seven Wives, was composed and performed by Kion Huru Orion, or as I know him, Michael. Thanks, Michael. If you would like to contact the show with comments or suggestions, you can email us at artodditiespodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. Join our group at facebook.com/groups/oddartpodcast, all one word. Or on Twitter at twitter.com/artodditiespod. That about wraps it up. Remember, the highest form of magic is doing, and expressing yourself is art. This is A.M. Hall, signing off.